Hi, I'm Michael. Welcome to Garage Topics. As you can see, we're in the garage here, and on the corner of your eye, you can see the 4Runner, which means it's in the garage. We're actually going to get down and dirty with getting this thing back to life. Past video, I showed you what the 4Runner's state was, and now we're actually going to go through all the steps to actually get this back up and on the road and running and actually get towards the fun stuff. But before we do the fun stuff, we got to do the maintenance things and get everything squared away to make sure that we got a good solid foundation of a project on our hands. So the first thing we're going to do is take care of the leaky axle seal that's on the rear end. When I got the vehicle, I knew it was leaking. I could see the drum was leaking everywhere, but I didn't know how much fluid was actually left in the differential, so I didn't even really want to drive it that much in case we ruined the rear end. So first things first, let's take it in depth with how we're going to replace the rear axle seal on a third gen, in my case, a 1998 Toyota 4Runner. When starting this job, make sure that you have enough room to pull the axle out straight so that you don't mess up any of the splines on the end of the axle. Got a 22mm. So I bought these 6. I've already punched them off with a breaker bar. The 4Runner has been sitting in the same place for a while, and you can see all of the oil from the axle just been leaking on this tire. The same thing is evident on the actual drum. You can see that it's just been seeping out from any hole that it can. Next step is to take off the drum. The next clip is rated PG-13 because the way that I was trying to take this rear drum off is completely wrong. It's getting stuck on this lip in here, I believe, and since I'm replacing all of this, I think I'm just gonna spray a little WD-40 or something around this edge. So like I said, I'm replacing all the brakes, so hopefully that'll get it out of there, and we go to the next step. Damn it! So what I'm going to do now is I found these 2 little holes here that'll take a 12mm bolt, and you can one by one press it in so it slowly teeter-totters out, if you will. So let me bring you in here. It's really close. These guys, one here, one there. I got this bolt from the local hardware store. Ching! So let's get to it. Please work. I'm going to do this very slowly. To get some gloves. Well, mistake of the day. I used too small of a bolt to go in here, and it got stuck. So I found one of the buddies. Exactly where I got them from at the hardware store. Ching! This one's twice the length, which this should do the job here. I don't have any fancy crowbars yet, so this cheapo Harbor Freight adjustable wrench spanner thing has enough gap in here. There we go, Eureka! Oh, golly. Look at that. It's filled with gunk and grease. Sheesh. There's not a single thing left on that pad pretty much. I hope it's not metal. There might be some pad to it, but golly. What an absolute mess. Good thing we're gonna replace all this crap, so that's good. Glad that's done. Golly. Draining the rear differential is the next step. You need a 24mm socket to remove the drain plug and the fill plug. Make sure you take off the fill plug first, that way you can be sure that you can get fluid back in the differential in case anything happens. Get your drain pan ready and get ready to smell one of the worst smells on a vehicle, the gear oil. I'm glad we're changing this oil because it looked pretty gross. Now that we finally have the drum off, we can go ahead and spray everything down so that we're not working with grease and gunk. So we can get the shoes off cleanly, get the wheel cylinder out since we're going to replace it all anyway, and then we can go ahead and pull the axle out. So let's get started. To get started, I got a drip pan here for when we spray a ton of brake parts cleaner everywhere inside. From there, we'll got a dust mask because you don't want any of that stuff going in your face. Also got some goggles, don't want to go in your eyes. Also got a drum brake tool set to get some of the springs off and just to make the job easier. I've read you can use flathead screwdrivers and pliers, but better safe than sorry, so I went ahead and got the tool set. And I got some cardboard down because it's going to get everywhere, and some paper towels. Hopefully this will be a better look to see how gunky and nasty this is. This is caked on everywhere. Safety first! Now that things are cleaned up, let's go ahead and remove these two pins here by moving that notch so it lines up with the other notch so it pulls right out. There's one here on the right, there's one here on the left. I definitely recommend using needle nose pliers to take this off. This one's side is a little bit tougher, but we eventually got it off. There it goes. The next spring to be removed holds the two shoes together. Since I'm buying a new hardware kit to replace all of these springs, I went ahead and got a flathead screwdriver, put it into the spring to release tension on the spring by stretching it out, and that made it a lot easier to get this spring off the two shoes. Whew. The parking brake cable is next to be removed, and it's held together on the shoes by a bracket that falls in line with the shoes. Go ahead and press with your hands that bracket towards where the cable connects to, releasing the tension and slipping it off the joint. Now the brake shoes are essentially free. They're just held on behind the hub by one main spring that's hidden behind that hub. Go ahead and get out your muscles and spread the shoes apart so that you can lift it above the hub and it'll all come free. That wasn't too bad. The original pins that we first started taking off that held that little spring, this here, it pushes right in. We took it out, this pin simply just comes through the back of the housing like so. Small little pin, and there's two of these guys. One there, and one over here. This is disgusting, by the way, just tons of grease and gunk. Next was removing the brake line from the wheel cylinder, and because of all the mud I decided to spray it down with some brake cleaner. I went ahead and took the opportunity to get some new gloves because those other gloves are just covered in gunk and I didn't want to get my tools all messy. So you just saw this here. We took all that drum shoes off and we loosened the brake line back here. Now the final pieces, there are 4 nuts that hold this axle onto the actual assembly housing. So we'll take those off. I put some PB Blaster on those about a week or two ago and sprayed them heavily so we didn't heavily run into any rust issues, but go ahead and crank those up. I'm going to go ahead and put a plastic bag over this brake line so I don't get brake fluid all over my tools. I'm going to see if I can get this without an impact wrench. Using a long torque wrench here with a 14mm. I've already loosened this one up just a little bit. Yep, that one's loose. So let's see if I can get this one loose in here. Whew. So far so good. Also found 2 other bolts here that hold in the parking brake lever, so I'm going to take those out. Should be 12mm. Ooh. now I've taken all the 4 bolts off the back, everything's disassembled. Let's try and see if we can get this thing out of here. Alright, take 1. The backing plate is actually attached to the axle shaft, so feel free to use that as leverage for getting the axle to pull out of the assembly. Be very careful that you pull it out straight because the end of the axle has splines that connect to all the other gears and you do not want to mess those up. So pull it out straight and evenly. Get a rag just in case it's slippery. This is a close-up of all the items that we will be replacing. All of the parts attached to the axle shaft need to be installed with a machine press, so we're going to drop these off at a shop. Alright, so we dropped off the axle at a shop yesterday. They were pressing it in today, but realized one of the seals was missing. We brought it there yesterday, but they didn't think they was needed, but it actually was needed, so I'm on my way to drop it off now. I may as well have fun trying to get there. It's 43 degrees out, so it's pretty cold in turbos. Oops, got the speed limit just fine. Be on the lookout for some future videos with my Mazda Speed 3. It's a blast to drive. So I brought you over the workbench to get a better understanding of how the seal actually sits on the axle housing, just so you know what's going on. You'll see that it goes down and it hits the collar, and so when it makes that tight connection there, that's when the seal is created. Hopefully you can see that in there. And what you want to make sure is that this gets pressed onto the exact amount of what it was stock so that it doesn't create a leak again, or any leaks whatsoever. That's how it should seal up. Alright, now we're about to put this bad boy in. You want to be really careful you don't nick up this top notches anywhere while you're putting it in here to mess anything up. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here because it's going to be in there anyway, so better safe than sorry. Just being extra careful to get it in there as straight as possible. There's a metal sliding ring above the seal which I'm just barely touching, but all the weight's on me, so I ate my Wheaties this morning. Go. Just very carefully slid it in there to what position we took it out from. There we go. It slid in. So let's take a look at the ABS circle to make sure that the ABS ring sits in there fine. And I have an eyeball of what it's set at before, so it'll give me a good indication that that seal is going to seat in there pretty good. Well, as you can see, the axle's back out, and I'm not too happy. What I thought was pressed on correctly, it definitely is not. I put the axle in. You'll see a picture here in a second of what I'm talking about. It's not in where it should be. Another way I checked to make sure that it was in right, or wasn't in right, is the seal inside the axle. I put a little bit of grease on there to see where it was making contact with this race, where it should make the contact of the seal, and there's no grease at all. So it's definitely pushed too far back. And I don't know how I even missed this. I'll bring you in here for this, but take a look. If you can look in close here, you can see that there's a little nick. That's where the shop cut off the old race, clearly stating that this race should be up here. I'm worried that that race there, or the nick behind the race, will make some oil come through, but I believe that if they reinstall it with it covering this completely, will be okay. But still, I gotta go back and have this pressed off, maybe even just cut off and then install it again, but I'm gonna have to buy new pieces of this, but the bearing should be okay. So part 2 will show you actually how to get everything back together and actually how to put it back together correctly based on your abilities and based on what the shop's actually able to do. So that was a bummer, but we got everything taken care of and we'll show you the highlights in the next episode. Thanks for watching.